disruption and innovation, what will the news look like in 2020? Before we dial ahead to 2020, though, I'd like to look back a few years, back to September 12, 2001. That morning in this very building and throughout this campus, you couldn't find a newspaper. The collegian racks were drained. Those white boxes that are everywhere containing the Center Daily Times, the New York Times, and USA Today, completely empty. You would have been hard-pressed to walk into a dorm room, an apartment, or a campus office and not found a television or radio tuned into a minute-by-minute coverage of those horrible events. Fast forward to today. More than half of us, according to Pew researchers, don't pick up newspapers or turn on our televisions for news. We go to electronic devices, like our cell phones. And that rate is growing exponentially. Pew also says that nearly 1 in 10 of us now use Twitter as our primary source of news. We also go to Facebook. There have been other changes. Since the year before 9/11, there are 30% fewer people working in newsrooms across the country. News organizations are reevaluating what news to cover, who should cover it, and how it should be covered, unbiased or with a point of view. On the business side of journalism, advertisers are staying away in droves. And while online advertising is increasing, it's not rising nearly fast enough or producing enough revenue to pay for the journalism that we've grown accustomed to. In short, journalism is changing rapidly. Tonight we've assembled a panel to help us sift through this business, and I'd like to introduce them now. To my immediate left is Kate Barron, who's the editor of the Patriot News of Harrisburg and vice president of content for the Pennsylvania Media Group. Kate was one of the lead editors on the Patriot News' Jerry Sandusky coverage that won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize. Beside Kate is Mark Rochester, deputy managing editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. His duties include overseeing digital strategy and content at the newspaper. Mark has made stops at the Associated Press and in newspapers in Denver and Indianapolis. To the far left is one of our own. That's Dan Victor. Dan Victor is social media editor at the New York Times. Dan graduated from this college with a journalism degree in 2006. Dan has worked at the Center Daily Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, among other stops. And to Dan's right is Sandra Clark. She's the deputy managing editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Among her duties, she oversees Inquirer.com, newsroom operations, and the arts, entertainment, and feature staff. Tonight, our moderator, who's in the middle, is John Dillon. John is the Norman Eberle Professor of Practice in Journalism. Before joining the college in 2007, John spent 32 years at the Richmond Times-Dispatch, including the last dozen as deputy managing editor. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Dillon.
Okay. Thank you, Russ. And thank you all for coming. I think we're in for an interesting evening. Let me explain a little bit about the format. I'm going to ask just several questions, 3 questions to be precise, to let our panelists talk about these. I think that may go 35 or 40 minutes or so. And then I want to open it up to questions from you. So we've got 2 microphones here. At that point, please step up to the microphone, tell us who you are, and ask your question. So just to add a few more pieces of data to what Russ had to say, an interesting thing occurred just a week or so ago when the circulation of newspapers, this is in 2013, reached a level of somewhere in the vicinity of 38 to 41 million weekday papers. In 1940, the circulation was 41 million, about the same. But in 1940, newspaper penetration, number of households that took a weekday paper, was 118%. Every home got a paper, and some got more than one. In 2013, that same number is 37%. But on the other hand, this is also an interesting piece of information, according to the Newspaper Association of America, the number of online people reading newspapers or reading newspapers online, 141 million. So if you combine all the newspapers in the country and their readership, 141 million, making it the 6th largest audience after sites owned by Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Facebook, and Amazon. That's a huge audience for newspapers. And as Russ mentioned about the money side, between 2005 and 2012, print advertising revenue dropped from $47 billion to $19 billion, and online revenue in newspapers rose only from $2 billion to $3 billion. But as the author of this report said, even a $22 billion industry, smaller than it was, is something to be reckoned with. So let's go ahead and get started. My first question to everybody, I've asked each of them to talk a little bit about what their news organizations are doing now, what their strategy is now, what they see coming to them in the immediate future. And we're going to go geographically west to east on this one. So we'll start in Pittsburgh. Mark?
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Pittsburgh is a little different in terms of, it's a little unique in terms of its demographics and its strategy for a metro daily newspaper. We've got fairly steady circulation in relative to what's happened in the industry over the last 2 years. Part of that is due to our readership market. We have an older market. About a third of Pittsburghers are over the age of 50. Mm-hmm. We have a highly educated market. We have 6 colleges in Pittsburgh, 2 law schools and a medical school. So it's an audience with high expectations. There's a strong demand for news. To go along with what Russ and John were saying, the appetite for news has never been greater nationwide. People want news. They just want it in a different format than we've been used to delivering it as an industry. What's different about Pittsburgh is, so we have this strong core print product where we still get 85% of our revenue. We also have a very unique and very strong website. We have 4 million unique visitors a month to our website. 60% of those visitors come from outside of Pennsylvania. If you think about that for a minute. There's a strong national and international audience for our online product. That allows us to approach this question of how do we go forward, how do we maintain a strong editorial product over the next several years. And so we have kind of a slightly different approach than what most metro papers are doing these days. We just went out and spent a significant amount of money buying color presses. Right now the Post-Gazette is a fairly dull gray newspaper. We're investing in full color presses where every page will be in color. And this basically says we are making an investment in the print product. We expect print to be around. We expect it to be a vital part of our business. And so we're doubling down on print. But we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're also investing in our digital products, and we do the full slate of digital products. We have a mobile site, we have mobile apps, we have mobile sports apps, we do ebooks. We are experimenting with different forms of interactives. So we're trying a multitude of ways to expand our digital audience. We just launched, we were fairly late into this game, but last month we just launched a pay meter on our site, which for Pittsburgh, which is an older and more traditional reading audience, was somewhat of a challenge to explain the need for us to do this. But we launched it. People started signing up and paying the first day we launched it, which we did not expect. So before they had to pay, they started paying, and you can't ask for more than that. We also implemented a new content management system, which again is kind of inside baseball. But the reason I bring it up, we are also investors in this platform, so we're helping develop it. We are one of the first 5 newspapers to implement this platform, and it's online and print content management. If successful, this has the potential to really be used by a lot of organizations whose print publishing equipment is probably 20 years old. People are looking for ways to have a single content management system to replace their legacy print systems. So this, again, places us in a good position to be very healthy on the financial side, which will allow us to evolve digital in a way that we want to set the agenda. It's not a luxury everyone has, but it allows us to approach this, I think, a little differently than a lot of other news organizations.
Okay. All right, Mark, thanks. And now to Harrisburg.
I think I'm a really good bookend for you in Pittsburgh, a paper that I admire very, very much. But first, I'd like to take a show of hands here. How many of you subscribe to a daily paper? Okay, thank you. No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, I'm just kidding. And we produce a very good paper in Harrisburg, the Patriot News, which we publish now 3 days a week. Last January, we took the very radical approach of deciding to put our business plan behind all the trends that we were seeing, the trends that Russ and John have mentioned here tonight already, and make digital first for us at the Patriot News and PennLive with our PennLive website. To do that, we had to do something drastic, we felt. We cut the paper back to 3 days a week. We only publish now on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. For our very devoted, loyal readers, it was a very traumatic decision on our part. It was painful. But as we did this, we put all of our newsroom firepower on making sure that PennLive was the best website possible out there. And we saw our digital audience numbers leap in just the first month. We're now seeing about a 14% increase in audience on PennLive compared to last year, and we're going up against a year where the Jerry Sandusky scandal dominated all of our coverage and drew international viewers to our site. Our reporters now post directly to PennLive, unless there's a really touchy story that for sure we want to have an editor look at it first. But reporters are empowered to do that. Same thing with our photographers. Everything is aimed at getting the news out digitally as soon as possible. Again, we learned that with the Jerry Sandusky story. To hold news for the paper, which we'd been doing in the past, was a recipe for disaster. The rest of the media pack was going to get it ahead of us, so that when we feel sure about the news that we're publishing, we put it on the website. Again, digital traffic soared by doing this very radical move. By March, we were rated the 11th fastest growing newspaper and website company in the country. We saw instant results from putting all of our attention, all our emphasis on online. Meanwhile, we compiled a really strong staff to run the Patriot News, and we were able to produce a paper that was timely, that was relevant, and while our circulation has fallen a bit, we are able to hold our own in these times when everyone is seeing circulation declines in print. And I think that's what I learned most from the Sandusky incidents last year, when I saw how, despite the kind of journalism we were doing, the print product was still seeing circulation go down. And if we couldn't sustain it and keep it on an upward track at that point in time, we just couldn't fight the overall trends that we're seeing across the country. I would contend that most of the readers of the Patriot News that don't get the paper every day and aren't happy about it have made the move to read local news on PennLive.com, and we're seeing the audience that's comprised of. It was a painful decision. As I've said many times, it was not for the faint of heart, but our staff at PennLive and the Patriot News have made it work, and we sit here now enjoying this increase in our website and enjoying the work that we do.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Let's go to Philly. Sandy.
Hello, I'm Philly. How are you guys doing? Well, we're all watching to see what happens at the Patriot News because they just kind of jumped into the pool and are taking their chances, and it sounds like it's working out really well. The problem that we all have still in this industry, though, is that what pays the bills still is print advertising. Digital is not monetized itself. Mobile is not fully monetized either. So you have to keep print going still. Readership, we can tell that most people are not reading print products every single day. I mean, habits have changed. We don't have as much time. So even subscribers, our core subscribers, are only reading the paper 2, 3, 4 times a week and not every single day. So that said, this is how our strategy came to be. I don't know if you know that our company, Interstate General Media, there's actually 3 media entities in this one company in Philadelphia. So there's the Philadelphia Inquirer, which has actually been around since 1829, if you can believe it, which is what gives me hope that this mother of all ownership battles that we're having right now, I don't know if you guys are following this, but everybody's suing everybody, and it's like reality TV on steroids. But since it's been around since 1829, we have hope that we're going to survive this as well. So you have the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is the broadsheet paper, and I think considered the more stodgy of the group, although look at us now, because we just redesigned ourselves, so we're feeling pretty good. And then we have the Daily News, which is our tab paper. And then we have Philly.com, which is the .com. We recently, in April actually, for the first time ever, the Inquirer got its own website, which is a paywall site. The Daily News also got its website, and then Philly.com operates sort of as a regional portal. Now, what's kind of interesting and sort of controversial about what we're doing is that we started our websites not so much for the digital push, but to secure more of our print customers. Since print still pays the bills, we've got to give our print customers something that they didn't have before. So with a subscription to print, you also get our replica edition, which is basically a PDF version of the print product, which is what I read every single day. And it's also interactive, so you can call up, headlines on your iPad or your tablet. You can actually change it into 1 million different languages. So I think that's sort of looking ahead to sort of demographic changes too, that if you speak Spanish, just change it to Spanish and you can read in Spanish. And then we also created our own website, which is a pay site. Now, what's controversial about this is that Philly.com uses a fair amount of our content from Inquirer.com for free. So you would think, well, who the heck's going to pay for Inquirer.com when Philly.com is using our content as well? Our readership data shows that there's not a huge amount of overlap. We can talk about, how accurate some of that data is, but it is showing that there's different audiences for Philly.com. Dan may even be able to speak to this because he actually worked at the Inquirer for a while. But so there's not a huge amount of overlap. And the thought is that you can start your day for the print subscriber, right? You start your day, you might read a story, you don't have enough time, you get on the train. I take the train in to work on many days. I don't see newspapers anymore. I see people with their tablets or their smartphones. So the idea is that there's sort of this seamless experience that maybe you put your print paper down, you get on the train, you finish your reading on the train, and you get to work and you go to your computer and you can really read all through the day if you really wanted to. So the idea is that hopefully our print subscribers will not get rid of their subscriptions. You see your paper piling up, you're thinking, well, maybe it's time to get rid of my paper. But if you've got the news on any of these devices, then you can continue to read it throughout the day. Or if you go on vacation. As a matter of fact, I was just in Prague, and I'm reading all of our ownership battles from Prague. That was kind of interesting. 3 lawsuits in 1 week. So we're hoping that will, solidify our subscriber base, and it also gets people into the habit of paying for content. I know you guys don't want to pay for content. I'm not used to paying for content, and most people aren't thinking that if you have all these devices, you're actually paying for content, because they're thinking, well, I'm paying for my print subscription. I'm actually not paying for news on a tablet or news on a smartphone, and in fact, you actually are. So we'll see. I mean, it's the great experiment. We'll see where we go from here, but it's a different approach because we still have to keep our print dollars.
Sandy, thank you. And now to New York City, Dan Victor.
Yes. So I think our big push obviously is digital. We love digital. We heart digital. We lesson 3 digital. I don't know everything. I don't want this to sound as if I'm downplaying the significance of print, because obviously print is so important. It's still obviously the biggest source of revenue for us. But the fascinating thing is, I think we're best known for the paywall, which, depending on what you want to call it, some people call it a leaky paywall, some people call it a metered paywall. The idea is you get 10 free articles per month, not counting what you might find through social or email, and then it will charge you a certain amount of money per month. There was a lot of skepticism when it first started, including, honestly, me when I was at other papers, but it's been tremendously successful. Just like Wall Street Journal's had a successful paywall, Financial Times have had successful paywalls. It's been so successful that it's actually offset the amount of revenue lost by circulation, by classifieds, all these other issues. We've actually had flat revenue since 2009, which is actually kind of amazing if you think about it. Whereas most newspapers have gone down fairly significantly since then, we've been able to maintain basically the same size of the newsroom in that time, so we're really excited about that. But most of the growth really is happening in digital, including my team. I'm on the social media team. And part of that is running the accounts, having that social presence, but we're also really focusing on how we can bring readers into the news process in a very smart, measured way, whether it's through comments, whether it's through interactives, whatever it might be. But my team isn't the only one that's growing. Our multimedia is growing phenomenally. We're doing many more documentaries through our video team. Our graphics, you may have seen some of our really cool animations, print graphics, interactive graphics. There's something for everyone there. So I think for us, we really like, I don't want to use the cliche pushing the envelope, but we really have been trying our best to move forward what we can do with the web. I think the most common example of that is called Snowfall, if you guys have seen that. It took a lot of resources, a lot of human manpower to do this. It was several people working over 6 months on this one project, but just truly kind of, it was a brand new way to tell a story using design that had never been done before, so I encourage everybody to look that up if you get the chance. But I think we are very lucky in that we have the resources to kind of be focusing on how we can tell stories in different ways, and we've realized how important that is, and yeah.
Okay, Dan, thank you. Well, speaking of resources, one of the questions I wanted to ask pertained to the idea that now, with the web, suddenly comes the thought that, well, there's got to be other ways to take our news content and make money off it, or in some cases take our staff and our brand and make money off it. And I wonder if you could just quickly run through what your organization is doing in that regard, archives and other things.
As I alluded to earlier, we're trying everything. So in some cases, we will repurpose content for ebooks. We are trying different sports apps. We are doing very elaborate interactives, not quite as ambitious as Snowfall, but for example, we did a big takeout on Gettysburg at the Post-Gazette, and we did it from the perspective of, while the battle was raging in Gettysburg, people in Pittsburgh were terrified that the battle was going to sweep westward and they were going to take over the city. So we had interwoven narratives from historical documents along with a timeline of how the battle was going, that sort of thing. Was very well received and was about a 3 or 4 month effort, which we have a staff of about 200, which in this day and age is pretty hefty for a Metro daily. So we probably had 10 people working on Gettysburg for about a month or so. So a significant investment of time and resources for us. But we're trying new and different storytelling models. And so with Gettysburg, we not only had the online interactive, but we did an ebook based on the interactive. So we're trying to spin off as many compelling storytelling models as we can. I guess that's it. I guess that's probably how we're tackling that.
Okay.
I'll start out by saying we do not have a paywall. We have no thought to putting up a paywall for the foreseeable future. You never say never. But for the most part, we sell our digital advertising based on traffic volume, not specific content. And so a paywall, I think, might be disastrous for us. We do look at all the other options for revenue. We do a lot of niche publications, including Central Pennsylvania Magazine and a health magazine. We're also doing podcasts this year. It's an experiment we're taking. We have podcasts for Penn State football, for high school football, and for fantasy football, which has actually been one of our most popular offerings online. And they can be sponsored. We sell high-res photo reprints. I would add that prom photos are our most popular. We did an ebook on the Penn State scandal. It did okay. It wasn't a huge moneymaker for us, and that wasn't really the idea. And we do have e-replicas as well of the paper, plus a variety of apps. I know our advertising staff would tell everyone if they were here that we're doing a lot with consulting on digital advertising. It really, truly is an educational process. It has been for us, and it is for advertisers out there as well. So it's a brave new world, and people do want some help in getting through it. We truly sell a lot more than Penn Live in the paper or the paper digitally. We're selling website and social media optimization, ad network purchases, a term called geofencing, which you can make sure that advertisers and customers see ads in specific areas. A lot of high-tech options now. We host webinars on digital advertising, things like that, and the newsroom as well has gone out to explain to people just how to navigate around the website, how to make Penn Live work for you, and we've really tried to put a big educational push on in the community this year. Some of it makes money, some of it doesn't. I think, again, we are on such an experimental year this year. We have to get through this first before we can concentrate. But again, our option was not to put up a paywall. We don't think they work very well for middle-sized papers. I think it's a different market if you're the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or another very high-intensive specialized publication. But for a middle market like us, I don't think it would work.
Let's see. Well, we've got apps, of course, but we also hosted a one-day university at the Enquirer. We had Philadelphia, sort of a hotbed, tons of universities and colleges, and so there were 3 college professors speaking on, really heavy topics. And for, I think, $150, you could pay and come and listen to them all day long. And it actually sold out. So I don't know if they're going to do more with it. I think the next one is going to be at the Constitution Center. We'll see where that goes. But it seemed to have worked pretty well. And it was a great way to actually bring the community into the paper. We've got a couple of things going that aren't monetized, but they might interest you. There's one is we host every year our food critic samples new brews, beers, craft beers, and so one day a year our newsroom smells like beer the whole day, because we've got all these craft beer makers who come in. They bring whatever they've made that year, and the first day of Beer Week in Philadelphia, we present to the winner of that event. And so we may do more with that. And actually, the most exciting thing we have right now is our food editor decided last year that she wanted to teach school children nutritional, economic, budget recipes. So she actually started an after-school program. And so she went into one school, and each week she would teach the kids how to cook something, and then she'd write about it. And we got so much reaction to that, and it still kind of surprises me because it was sort of such a simple thing. I think people are maybe there's just too much going on, and everyone wants to help in some way. So after that one year, we got so many offers from readers of things they wanted to donate to school. And actually this year we've expanded into 5 schools, and it's staffed completely by volunteer readers who were so touched by the series that they have now gone into the schools themselves. We got one of the stores, ShopRite, a big grocery store, to sponsor all the food, so they buy all the ingredients for the kids. And we also partnered with the foundation of the Vetri Group, which is the best restaurant in Philadelphia. They have a foundation, and so they also assist us with that. So we haven't so much monetized it, but I think that's one of probably our best reader engagement, and has a lot of potential.
Yeah, like I said earlier, the paywall probably is the big one, and for what it's worth, I completely agree with Kate that it totally depends on the publication and the market itself. New York Times has been able to do it really well, but I think that it would probably go differently in Harrisburg, and it would probably go differently in State College if I were, say, in the Collegian tried to throw one up. I don't think it would work quite as well. We have really gotten into events lately on a couple different scales. We have some very, very big name, big money events like Andrew Ross Sorkin, who runs our Deal Book vertical. He'll bring in a lot of really big business people and charge people a lot of money to come to those things. Tom Friedman, our columnist, he will put together these global galas that are way over my head. I don't understand it, but it looks really cool. But we also have smaller events too. We have a performance space connected to the newsroom, and we have a series called Times Talks that we do. And those will usually riff off the news in some way, where we'll have our entertainment reporter interview Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul about the finale of Breaking Bad. So we've gotten into small events like that. We've gotten into big events. We're also looking into potentially other subscription products. They have not come out yet, but there's some discussion of possibly some ways to repackage the news at a lower price point than what we have for your basic subscription. There's some talk of a cooking vertical or a dining vertical, whatever those might be. So we feel like there are other ways to get people to pay for news in one way or another that isn't just as simple as putting up a paywall.
Okay, great. So this next question is probably the easiest one for all of you. What will the news look like in 2020? I say that because unless all of you write down exactly what they say, put it away for 7 years, and then hold them accountable, they can get away with pretty much anything. But just to put things in perspective, that's 7 years out. We look back 7 years, 2006. Facebook was 2 years old. It had just gotten off the Harvard campus and was in other universities. Twitter was just started, and the iPhone was 1 year away from being made public. So things can change very quickly in 7 years. So we'll go west to east again. Mark?
I don't think news gathering fundamentally will change all that much. We might have different tools that we deploy to, out in the field, but basically how we assign, go out and gather news and then process it, I don't think it's going to change all that much. I think what will change is we'll have more options to display it. Tablets and smartphones will have more horsepower behind them, therefore they'll be able to display high-definition graphics and other visual elements, which will allow us to do, I think, different kinds of storytelling on these devices, even more so than we do now. I think you'll see much more differentiation between print content and mobile content than we have now. My dream with the Post-Gazette is that I'll be able to hire editors who will take news content and actually write it and display it for whatever device it's on. We're not in a position to do that today, but I hope we'll be able to grow, and I'll be able to hire the staff to do that. I see that as an important part of our development. The folks who read news on a tablet, the way folks read news on a tablet is different than the way you read it on your cell phone. We need to tailor our news to meet that reader's demand for how they want to consume the content. I think despite the emphasis on digital first, and I say this as someone who oversees digital, fundamentally, everything you see on the web really starts out as a print-centric product. Even if you're, tell me if you disagree with this, but I think even in papers that have reduced their number of publication days, they still go about the news gathering process pretty much the same way. They still have reporters go out, report, try and get the news on the website first, but then step back and provide the context and the depth for print readers. And I think you'll still see that pattern continue going into the future. I think the big changes you'll see is again in the delivery. And I think you'll see more geo-targeted news. I think you'll see news that is linked to television programs that you're watching. You've got your tablet in front of you. You've got a program on television. Those two devices will talk to each other, and they'll say, while you're watching a story about the Philippines, you'll get the latest news concerning that disaster. And then I think you also see news that is linked to consumer behavior. If you're going out and you're eating at certain restaurants, your local paper will start offering you restaurant reviews based on where you go, the types of restaurants you go and eat. I think you'll see that kind of sophistication in terms of news delivery, and I think those are the real changes you'll see in news. I think fundamentally how we go about doing our jobs, I don't think it's going to change all that much.
Okay, Mark? Okay.
I'd say I agree with a lot of what you said, especially some of your technological thoughts. And in particular, half of our audience is reading us on phones now, it's mobile, and it's really changed from just when we started this whole operation, and more people are reading us on desktops and going to our homepage. But I would say that I think we are actually doing things a little bit differently than we used to in print, and I've been in print for almost 30 years. Right now, we are pushing audience engagement with our reporters. We are trying to develop more of a conversation, I think, since time began. Newspapers in particular talked at readers, especially on the editorial page. It was us pontificating to some extent on what we thought you needed, what news we thought was good for you. Now we are trying to get more of a dialogue going, and that is a real seismic shift, I think, in the business. And we're doing it in fits and starts, but we're really working hard at this. We were walking over here to the hub about how reporters are now really encouraged to wade into the comments on Penn Live and to strike up conversations with readers as they post comments to get their views on the news that they're producing. So while some things do remain very basic, and the who, what, when, where, and how is still the crux of what we do, we are trying to create more of a conversation with the public. And I think that's the difference between online and print to a big degree. Yes, we've had letters to the editor forever, but this is much more of an active conversation. I was talking about a big package we're going to be producing in a couple weeks on hospitals, and in the old days, we would have planted the 100-inch story on the front of the Sunday paper and let it sit, and there it is for you to peruse at your time, take an hour of your time off and read the story. What we'll do for digital is put it up in increments throughout the week leading up to the Sunday paper. So online, you can start reading it on Monday, and maybe you'll read one viewpoint on Monday, another viewpoint on Tuesday, another viewpoint on Wednesday, and then hopefully people reading the stories, which I'm hoping are going to include hospital administrators who are involved in them, will wade into the conversation. And that story could change very drastically by the time we get to the end of the week, depending on what people are adding to it. And I think that's what's really exciting. It's very new for us out there, and it can be a little intimidating, but it's engaging more with the audience. And we're really trying to work on that this year. We have a lot more to go, but are really working on that. One other thing I would be hesitant not to point this out. Another thing that we have to keep above all in the front of our minds as we go through this whole digital shift is the need to do the really substantial news that we've always done, the stuff that we really all get into the business for. And in talking to the journalism students I spoke to in a class this afternoon, what they really want to get into the business for, and that's watchdog work, that's investigative work. Yes, I'm on my soapbox, but in the middle of all this digital transformation we went through this year, we went to really important right-to-know cases that we got heavily involved in, and those were some of our proudest moments this year. So we have to remember what we're in this business for. Yes, we have to adapt to changing times and changing platforms, but at the heart, it's still really doing good journalism.
Okay, before I turn to Sandy, let me mention that when we finish Sandy and Dan speaking, we're going to go to your questions. So if you've got some questions, formulate them and be ready to step up to the microphone. So, Sandy?
Okay, thanks. I guess I don't know is not an acceptable answer, right? So, okay, I'll give it a shot then. Just to piggyback on what Kate said, regardless of what tools we have, what kind of technology is going to exist, at the heart of it, you still have to ask yourself every single day, why would the reader care? And whether it's a multimedia project that you're doing or a story that you're writing, why would the reader care? We grapple with that now. Myself, even as a reader, my job is to read every single day. And there's a few days where I'll read through the paper and I'm like, well, why would we care? And if I have to ask myself that question, then most certainly our customers are asking themselves that too. I was thinking of demographics. So in 2020, the demographics are going to be shifting, continue to shift, right? And I was just, Latinos and African Americans, 70% of them, us, I call myself us. Actually, I can kill a lot of birds because I'm also part Asian. So, 70% use smartphones now. And we have entire huge segments of our population who have been actually excluded from the news process through time, and including now. Most of our newsrooms are not very diverse. Don't be fooled that Kate and I are up here because, there aren't a lot of women represented still, I think, at the management table. Is that right, Kate?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There's huge potential, I think, for reaching new audiences, which we haven't done a good job at. So in 2020, I think the world's going to look a little bit different, and I think we have to be prepared to see through a different lens than what we see through now, to really fine-tune that lens. And I think there's a lot of potential for entrepreneurs to continue to serve, all of our media needs as well.
Okay, Dan?
So first, I want to apologize to anybody who follows me on Twitter because you already know my answer to this. I tweeted out a couple thoughts earlier because I honestly just wanted to get some feedback on it because I don't know what it's going to be like in 2020. But when I did that, I got some really solid feedback on it, and that actually was kind of demonstrating one of my first points in that I think, Kate talked a lot about reader engagement, and I think that's going to become more and more, not so much an add-on to what we do, but a core part of it. I think more so the reader's going to absolutely expect to participate in some way. And when we talk about engagement, and this is a lot of what we do on my team at the Times, it's not so much, again, I don't want to call it an add-on. It's not something that we push over here. It really can make the content itself better. I'm sure that every single person in this room at one point tonight has had a thought that if you were sitting in one of these chairs, you'd be able to contribute to it and make a great point, and we would all be better off for it. You just don't have that opportunity right now because we're yapping up here and we're the only ones allowed to. So I think more and more readers are going to expect to be able to do that, and I think it's going to make the journalism better. I also, and I got some pushback on this on Twitter when I mentioned this, but I really do think that there's going to be greater media literacy amongst our audience. And some people thought that I was being idealistic by saying that, but I think that every time you see a major news organization screw up the Boston bombings, or you see them screw up the healthcare ruling, or whatever it is, I think there's a little bit more distrust of the media built into that. So I think what's going to happen is people are more and more going to realize that when there's breaking news, we don't know if this is confirmed, we don't know if this is kind of confirmed, we don't know if this is just guessing. I think more and more people are going to expect to be able to be alerted by the news organization, what they know, what they don't know. I think they're going to be smarter about what's confirmed and what isn't confirmed, and we're going to have to respond by being smarter about how we're presenting that. I also think that there is a focus right now on what I call the what's story. So a story about a what would be this panel of editors up here, or it might be a Penn State football game, or it might be a typhoon in the Philippines. And I'm not saying that that's going to go away by any means, but I do think that there's kind of this emerging demand for stories that are based on where and when. And that could be, I arrive in, say, college and I get out my phone and I want to know exactly what's happening right around me at exactly this time, or that's going to be coming up in an hour from now. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist already. It does to some extent. I mean, the Center Daily Times has The Weekender. The Collegian has, oh shoot, what's the entertainment thing? Somebody help me. Yeah, there we go. All right. So, that does happen, but I think there's something more immediate that's coming up. One thing that we've done at the Times, which is really cool lately, is this feature called New York Today, which is published every morning at about 6 a.m., and it's just very concise. What do you need to know in New York for today? Been wildly popular, even though it's basically listings written in a fun way, but that's all people want. They want to know what's happening around them today. And that is actually a good example of the next point I was going to make about having to write what we do in a much snappier, much more consumable way. People make fun of BuzzFeed a lot, but you can really zip through something that's happening because you get your photo, you got your sentence, photo, sentence, photo, sentence. And when there's breaking news, you can get through that really quickly, whereas we're still trying to get you to read a 600-word story. Now, what I don't want to happen when that goes on is to lose all context. And I think we're going to have to develop new ways of presenting that context, because I think there's going to be less and less likely that readers will be willing to sit through that 600-word story, partly because there's going to be just more competition for your time. I mean, we tend to think of newspaper competition being the Inquirer's competition for the Daily News and the Patriot News. But just as much, it's also BuzzFeed, it's also Upworthy, it's also hanging out with your friends, it's also video games. The real competition is for your time. We've asked for 15 minutes of your morning for a long time, but now we may be trying to get your news consumption into the 2 minutes that you're willing to give us, while you're waiting in line at the cash register or whatever it might be. So I think it's because we have such stiff competition for everyone's time, we're going to have to figure out how we can present the news in a much more fast, consumable way. And also, animal photos are still going to be big.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, Dan, thanks. Okay, questions? Who's got a question?
Journalist?
You want to step up to the microphone if you can, please?
Kind of squished in, but you
Okay.
mentioned competition, and I was wondering if you guys work together or if you just stole each other's ideas.
Both.
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, every year we go to, there's conferences and they have show and tell, and all we do is just steal each other's ideas. I mean, a great idea is a great idea. But
Yeah, we read all the sites we can get our hands on, read a lot of other papers. It's interesting in Pennsylvania in particular, I've made this observation, a lot of the newspaper editors have been at it for a really long time. So we're a pretty chummy group, but we'd steal each other's ideas like in a heartbeat. All's fair.
yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is who's going to come up with the kinds of the killer ideas that the entire industry needs. And everybody is taking a shot at that, but it's hard to succeed, I think, from what we've seen thus far. Okay, more questions?
Somebody over there.
Yep, go ahead. Microphone? Yep. You can, Dylan.
So we opened the conversation today talking about how each publication has adjusted to a different mediascape and about how paywalls are now a way to monetize the digital sphere and sort of finding a way to make the paper product more compatible with what we see. But this is a conversation about the future. So what's going to be the end of the paper? What are the 4 apocalyptic horsemen of the broadsheet?
All right, good question. Okay, can we foresee a demise and what would it look like?
The printed word's been around for a long time. It's a hard thing to kill. I think there's going to be print products in most markets during our collective lifetimes. In some cities, might print disappear altogether. I don't want to name them, but I can picture in my head a few markets where print may disappear. Particularly in towns where competitive forces aren't going to drive news organizations out of business. I think you'll see small town newspapers will get along just fine. Markets, say, of Pittsburgh, of Cleveland, of Milwaukee, those are going to be the battleground cities where it's going to be hard to tell how successful print will be going forward. Every market's a little different. It really depends on what we as managers of news organizations do to try and keep audiences engaged, to try and reinforce our positions as watchdogs of our communities. Basically, what people want out of their news is 2 things. They want to believe that the news organization is looking out for them, and second, they want to believe that your news organization, as a unique entity covering your community, is able to provide the context that Dan was just talking about. Whether you're writing about local issues or whether you're presenting national, international news in a format that lets them understand the context of a story. Basically, what's happened now is, again, because of mobile devices and the internet, basically the shelf life of any story now is about an hour, whether that's an Aurora, Colorado shooting or the Philippines or name your big news story. The attention span of the audience is about an hour before they feel, oh, I know that story. You're not telling me anything new about this story just by showing me the breaking news. I want to know, how does this shooting affect my life, or how is this going to affect the availability of guns? What's going to change because of this story? People want that. They want it now. They don't want to wait till tomorrow when you had a chance to go out and fully report it. They want it now. I think that's going to be the challenge going forward. How do we provide as much context as we can to these stories in order to keep our audiences engaged?
Well, and what's going to pay for these staffs to chase down these stories? You know, a lot of people say, well, you know, it's all digital now, it's all on the web, you can find it, so why would we pay? Well, a lot of those really good stories are done by news organizations that, you know, pay reporters and editors to do them. Do you read the paper?
I do.
You do? Would you pay?
I would. It's a little different being here because we have the newspaper readership program, so I can pick
Yeah.
up the
Right.
New York Times every single day if I want to. But I can see myself paying for it, yeah.
Well, the thing is, you know, you guys are young now. You're going to be old someday, right? And so someday you're going to care about your taxes. Someday you're going to care about what kind of schools your kids are in. Some days you're going to care about, you know, care more about government corruption. So these are all things that, you know, just don't come out of the sky. You know, the big chain, these small towns, Warren Buffett's buying up all these papers, so the small papers are doing well. They're still, you know, sort of central part of their towns. It's the metropolitan papers, I think, and the, you know, bigger areas that are struggling because people are busy. They've got other things to do. So we can't connect. You know, Philadelphia serves Philadelphia, a bunch of big suburbs, plus South Jersey. And when you do readership surveys, the readers say, well, we want to see more local news. Well, how do you define local in a region that vast? So all we can do really is come up with stories that kind of bind people.
And I think it's important to separate the medium of the paper itself from the reporters who are writing on it. I think the Patriot News is actually a good example of reporters who are still primarily focused on online are doing those right-to-know requests, right? So the journalism itself, we can only hope that that will continue. But in terms of the medium itself ending, I think it would come from two things. I think that one way that it would end would be if we suddenly figured out this digital marketplace. And I think it's a cold economic question, really. If somehow we figured out that, oh, wow, we can make way more money through digital than we did through print, there would be some print nostalgics, but I think most, you know, the bean counters would say, all right, screw print, we're done with it. So I think if there were some way to do that, I'm not saying I know what that answer is, but then otherwise, I think if it were to come from the other direction, which nobody wants to happen, where just so many people stop reading print, I think that would happen more if digital, just the presentation of it, catches up to the experience of reading in print, because we all love, you know, getting the Sunday paper and divvying up the sections and doing the crossword and all that kind of stuff. So there still is that experience that digital isn't going to match. But if there are other ways that digital can up its game to overcome the great pleasure you get out of print, then.
Plus, you know, news organizations are redefined, so we can talk about newspapers or news media, but my daughter not too long ago, 17, and she says, oh my God, Usher, he's dead. And I said, really? And and I'm an entertainment editor, so I thought, well, Usher the singer. So I saw you shrug, so it's Usher the singer. Very famous singer. So, you know, I said, well, I guess I better, you know, call my entertainment writer and see what we can do. So I said, well, where did you see that? And she sends me the link to the site, and it's a site entirely designed to make up stories about celebrities dying. So Usher wasn't dead. But then I said, well, the first thing I said, go to TMZ. Now, TMZ, you know, it's a celebrity site, and I think basically has pretty good credibility for celebrity news. I didn't say go to the New York Times. I didn't say go to Philadelphia. I said go to TMZ. So.
Yeah, but you're also pointing out the need to have really great reporters out there who are going to be skeptical. I can remember Sarah Ganem telling a crowd in here about a year ago that one thing she learned in her experience was make sure that you don't believe everything you hear from your sources. I mean, you have to have that questioning, that ability to really question what's out there in news, to keep that credibility coming in, which is just as important online for Penn Live as it is for Patriot News in the paper. I just add one more thing about print. I still get the New York Times in print every day. I find it a luxury to sit there and pore over the huge pages with a gorgeous design, and I value it, I treasure it, I love it, and I feel the same way about the Patriot. I do think that the Sunday paper has a heck of a long shelf life ahead of it for the very reason that that's kind of a Sunday thing to do. Time slows down a little bit. You want to have the luxury of sitting there. You want to really lean back and enjoy your paper as opposed to leaning in to read your screen. And I think that that's going to keep it alive and kicking for a long time.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Let's see, do we have somebody moving? We have somebody moving forward. Okay, very good.
In terms of ethics, with the changing landscape we're seeing with a lot of social media stuff, and as you said, with people wanting to get to stories first and things like that, how do you see print journalism or just journalism in general changing as far as ethics are concerned because of how quickly we can get stories now and how important it is for some people, they think, to get to stories first?
I think good journalism isn't going to change at all. I think we're going to see more and more examples of bad journalism, but good journalism isn't going to change one iota. We generally have, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I personally tend to be slow on breaking news purposely because I feel like there's very little to be gained by beating somebody on Twitter by 15 seconds and a lot to be lost by being wrong on Twitter by 15 seconds. I think more and more, going back to what I was saying earlier about the audience being more literate about the media, I think more and more the audience is going to demand that reporters slow down and make sure they actually have confirmed and that they actually thought about this and maybe even ran it by an editor if it's something big. So I've never seen there being a real big conflict between being first and right, because if you're first and wrong, then you weren't first at all. And I think that as more and more journalists get egg on their faces and they screw this up, I think newsrooms are going to start to say, okay, we really do need to slow this down. That's probably a little idealistic, and I think we're going to start to see two different camps where we're going to see people continue to go down that road of fast, 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 and we might see other people retrenching and saying, okay, sure, you can see those 10 tweets over there, but when you really want to know that it actually happened, then you can wait and see our tweet, and then you're going to feel good about it.
I was just going to relate an example from my own experience working for the AP in California. Gay marriage has been a huge issue in California for the last several years, and there was a point a couple of years ago where there was a huge court decision, California court decision, about whether the gay marriage initiative was going to be upheld by the district court there. And so we had been gathering all this background, and we were writing different versions of stories, whether it was upheld, whether it was struck down. And so we made arrangements with one of the original parties who filed the suit that as soon as they got the decision, they would hand it to us. So we were sitting outside their office at 8:30 in the morning, just waiting for them to come in and see if they'd gotten the ruling from the court. So all of a sudden, our phones in the bureau light up, and it's the AP headquarters in New York saying, CNN is reporting that this was struck down, and why don't you guys have a story yet? And we were 99% sure that no one actually had a copy of the ruling. And so every 5 minutes, New York headquarters is calling us in San Francisco and saying, why don't you have the story? We're seeing tweets based on the CNN report. And so finally, we learned that CNN is basing this on a New Yorker blog post that says, I've talked to someone who's seen the court decision, and they say that this has been struck down. So we relay that to New York, and New York is still saying, well, we've got to have a story. We need a story. We're like, no, right, you can fire all of us, but we are not going to put out a story unless we know it's true. And so, 2 minutes later, we get the court decision, we read it. Actually, several of us are sitting there reading it, and we get a story out in about 2 minutes. And so what you were just saying, I would rather have been 10 minutes behind on the story and get it right than to have to issue a correction or a clarification on an issue that is tremendously important to millions of people about an issue like that. I think there are going to be challenges to our ethics, and we are going to need to be, as editors and managers, we need to be particularly vigilant about making sure that our staffs go through exactly the same procedures that we do with social media, with blogs, with all the things that we're doing. We need to be extra vigilant that we maintain our standards and do exactly the same kind of reporting that we're doing now.
Thank you.
I would also just quickly add that I think I could, again, easily be accused of idealism for thinking that we can slow down and not face any consequences for that. I think that will happen when the audience shifts its expectations. It can't just be journalists saying, okay, we're going to slow down and hope that nobody's mad at us. I think when the audience is so fed up with people racing to be first and getting it wrong, like in that situation, and then they reward the newspaper that is second or third or fourth, that slow down and that they have the track record of not making that mistake, that's when that can happen, but not until the audience starts to think that way.
Yeah, I think it's a better revision of that. I agree, and I'll bring it closer to home. The erroneous report that Joe Paterno was dead, which came out a day before he actually did succumb to cancer. And we were in the heart of that. We did not report it. There was such intense pressure from big media outlets who were reporting it to a website over here that was reporting it, whose editor got it wrong and ended up losing his job. Those consequences were that serious. And thank God we didn't go ahead with it, but I could see how it can happen because the pressure to be out there when everybody else is reporting something, even though it hasn't been adequately verified, is intense. That was a lesson to everybody. It's a reminder, and these things prop up every once in a while, and it takes your breath away that how scary it can be out there. You have to stick to those journalism basics amid all the incredible, intense pressure of a big story like that. So I hope you're right.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. Anybody have a question?
No one's asked about jobs in the future?
I will. Jobs in the future. Talk briefly about that. Maybe we don't have to go as far as 2020. I think a lot of students out there have got some idea that they're going to have to be able to do much more than we used to have to be able to do. But what do you foresee for the talent you want? Mark?
I think, again, working for the AP before I moved to Pittsburgh about 6 months ago, in traveling around and visiting newspapers across the country, what I'm starting to see is papers are slowly starting to hire again. Many papers have reduced their staffs 30, 40, 50% over the last few years. Some of them are starting to realize, hey, we cut way too much. We've eliminated some of the things that made us a unique must-go-to site for our local readership. So they're starting to go back and hire health reporters and education writers and things they may have cut over the last few years that were really core elements of what their audience valued. So I think you're starting to see hiring along those lines, and I think that's going to continue going forward over the next few years. Things have sort of stabilized. At least the declines aren't as great as they used to be, or as great as they've been the last 2 years. So I think you're starting to see folks make very strategic, very thoughtful hires based on what they believe their audiences are going to want going forward. And I think, as you were saying, I think watchdog reporting, I think, is going to be top of the list there. So I think people realize the news we generate has to move the needle. We have to somehow register with our readers that we're doing important work, and it's work they can't miss. And watchdog or enterprise reporting is usually the top of the list of things people want to see from their local news.
By the way, we've hired, I think, about a dozen reporters in the last 6 months. Can you hear me? Yeah. Newsflash, you guys are going to be the first to hear it. We're having paid internships again next year, something that we had really pushed for. We've gotten great talent out of Penn State. Two of our actually really good reporters, Aubrey Wellen and Claudia Vargas, are from Penn State. Aubrey, we sent her out to Boston when the marathon bombing happened. And now, because of a lot of the changes in the industry, there used to be a time to get your story on the front page, to be able to do a big project, you had to be this big star reporter. Well, now if you come in and you can hit the ground running, you're really good at what you do, you're curious, and speaking a different language is helpful too. You can get on the front page every day if you've got some hustle. I mean, it's really, there's a lot of opportunities. All those kind of walls that we used to have up are gone now. So while things are a little bit tough, it's also, a good time to be in the industry for young people.
I totally agree. We're hiring too. In fact, we had an intern last summer, Anna Orso, who's on the staff of the Collegian, and we've already made her a job offer for when she gets out of school in May, and hopefully she'll be joining us then. She showed all that drive and all that ambition that you want to see in a reporter, and she had all the basics down too. Really quickly, I'm going to repeat Sarah Ganem's admonitions to journalism students when they get out in the real world and look for a job. It matters who you work for. Make sure you find a really good media company that's willing to invest in you and training and is willing to give you a shot at the big story. Social media matters sometimes, but really good shoe leather reporting where you're talking to your sources face to face is even more important. And I worry sometimes that that's a lost art. People think they can just pick up the phone or just email somebody or get on Twitter or get on Facebook and talk to sources. You've got to be able to talk to people face to face. Don't underestimate that people will lie to you. As I said, you still have to have that cynical streak to be a really good reporter. Question everything to get it right. This is one that is Sarah, not me. Lie on your time cards. These are not 9 to 5 Monday through Friday jobs. You have to be willing to make those kind of sacrifices if you really want to catch on in this medium. It is totally worth it, but it is not. Work-life balance can get out of whack at times, and believe me, it's a sacrifice at times, but it's always worth it. And finally, when you do your reporting, we talked about this a little bit, really invest in doing good enterprise reporting. Move your story forward. Don't just report on what happened. Report on what should happen next, and that's one really great way to succeed. But we have jobs out there too, and we're always looking for great talent.
Okay, good. Dan?
Yeah, so the last couple jobs I've had have all been kind of social media related, but I've always said that I would not have been able to do any of them if not for the first 4 years I spent as a reporter at the Patriot News. Getting down those basics, learning the fundamentals, and learning not just how to get a lot of clicks, get a lot of retweets, but knowing how to integrate it within a newsroom and how to make the right editorial judgments that I had to make at every school board meeting that I covered was so essential. So even if you are interested in some other jobs other than reporting, I still think that it's great to have that background in reporting, copy editing, whatever you can do. And then on top of that, if you are interested in expanding beyond that, and it's really hard to know what you're going to be interested in down the road, but if you do get tired of reporting after a couple years, I think the key thing is just adaptability, creativity, entrepreneurship, just showing some kind of energy above what everybody else is doing, essentially. I've hired entry-level positions where we're getting essentially the same resume and cover letter 150 times, and people have done the same kind of story. Maybe one leads a little bit better than the other. The ones that really impressed me were the ones who really did something spectacular that nobody else has done. I give the guys and gals at Onward State a lot of credit, and some of them have landed some really good jobs after school because they showed something that nobody else had done. So I would just, get the basics down, because you're going to need that for wherever you go. But continue to look for places that no one else is going and see what you can do.
Okay, great. Well, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank all of our panelists for their thoughts, their insights, and their predictions. And thank you very much. Good night.
I love that Singapore package. That was fabulous.